"Pilots don't look like you, sweetheart." Brandon Mercer said it loud enough for the entire private terminal to hear, stabbing a manicured finger at the 4 gold stripes on Captain Naomi Carter's shoulders. Behind her, $42 million of gleaming Gulfstreams sat on the rain-slicked tarmac, engines cold. He demanded a real captain, a man who looked the part. He had no idea he was already looking at the only person in that building licensed to fly him anywhere. And in less than 20 minutes, every word he just said would end his career. 11 hours earlier, the sky over Teterboro was still clear. Naomi Carter arrived at the executive hangar at 5:30 that morning, the way she'd arrived every morning for 2 years. 40 minutes before anyone expected her, coffee in a dented thermos, flight bags slung over one shoulder. The first time she'd ever set foot in a place like this, she'd been 17 years old, pushing a broom across a ramp at a regional airport outside Detroit, watching jets she could never afford to ride lift off into a sky she swore she'd own one day. She'd grown up in her grandmother's 2-bedroom house on the east side, raised by a woman who cleaned office buildings at night so Naomi could finish high school. Her mother was gone before she turned 6. Money was always a held breath. But the sky was free to look at, and Naomi never stopped looking up. She washed planes for flight lessons. She studied weather charts under a flashlight after her shifts. At 18, she enlisted in the Air Force, and within 6 years, she was a C-17 aircraft commander, flying 80-ton cargo jets out of dirt strips and places the evening news only mentioned when something went wrong. She'd landed an aircraft with a failed hydraulic system in a sandstorm and walked away. She'd flown wounded soldiers home through weather that grounded everyone else. By the time she left the service, Captain Naomi Carter held an airline transport pilot certificate, 3 type ratings, and more than 9,000 hours, most of them in conditions that would make a civilian pilot's hands sweat. What the men in the corner offices never bothered to learn: the cleaning lady's granddaughter from Detroit was, by any measure that mattered, the best stick in the building. Brandon Mercer built his reputation on a different kind of climb. The only son of a Connecticut family that summered on the vineyard, he'd glided from prep school to an Ivy League EMBA to executive vice president at Vantage Global on a current of inherited connections and a smile that worked on the right people. 41 years old, $4,000 suits, a Patek Philippe that he angled toward the light when he shook hands. He ran Vantage's acquisitions division like a personal kingdom, and he was 3 days from closing the biggest deal of his life, a $900 million logistics merger that would land him a board seat, and, he was certain, the corner office when the CEO finally stepped aside. Brandon Mercer was a man who had never once been told no by anyone he considered beneath him, and to Brandon Mercer, almost everyone was beneath him. The CEO of Vantage Global was a woman named Catherine Reyes. She'd founded the company out of a rented warehouse in Oakland 30 years earlier, and she'd built it into a $14 billion empire on a single stubborn principle: she only cared what you could do, never what you looked like doing it. 2 years ago, she'd flown commercial through a thunderstorm so violent that half the cabin was sick, and the only calm voice in that ordeal had been a deadheading pilot in the seat beside her who'd quietly explained every bump until the fear drained out of the cabin. That pilot was Naomi Carter. Catherine hired her on the spot to run her personal flight and never regretted it for a second. But Catherine kept her own counsel, and most of her executives, Mercer included, had no idea who actually sat in the left seat of the company jet. To them, the flight crew was furniture. Expensive, replaceable furniture. That blind spot was about to cost one of them everything. Every flight day followed the same rhythm, and Naomi ran hers like a metronome. 2 hours before any departure, she walked the aircraft alone. Tires, brakes, control surfaces, the long sweep of each wing under the work lights. She read the maintenance logbook cover to cover. Every entry, every signature, every deferred item. Her first officer, a steady former regional captain named Tom Albright, used to tease her about it. "Nobody reads the whole log, Naomi." She always gave him the same answer. "The day you stop reading is the day it kills you." Tom had stopped teasing about it a long time ago. That morning, the rhythm broke. The flight was scheduled for that evening. Catherine Reyes and a small group of executives flying down to Atlanta to close the merger in person the next day. Routine, 3 hours, smooth air forecast for the route. But when Naomi opened the maintenance logbook at 5:40 a.m., something didn't sit right. There was a fresh entry from the night before, signed off on the number 2 engine's anti-ice system. The squawk had been written up 4 days earlier by Tom himself. An intermittent fault in the engine cowl anti-ice, the system that keeps ice from forming and breaking loose into the engine in cold, wet air. A known issue. A grounding issue, until fixed. And now, suddenly, it was signed off as repaired. Inspected, returned to service. The signature at the bottom belonged to a contract mechanic Naomi had never met. She frowned. She'd been at the hangar until 9 the night before. No mechanic had touched that engine while she was there. She told herself there was an explanation. There usually was. But the back of her neck prickled, the way it used to over a desert that was too quiet. 2 days earlier, she'd noticed the first odd thing. Brandon Mercer had come down to the hangar in person, something he never did, and spent 20 minutes in the maintenance office with the door closed. When he left, the lead mechanic, a quiet older man named Hector Ruiz, wouldn't meet her eyes. The next day, Hector requested 2 weeks of personal leave, effective immediately, and a contract crew Naomi didn't recognize appeared in his place. She'd tried to dismiss it. People take leave. Contractors fill in. But Hector had worked that hangar for 19 years, and Hector did not blink. Then came the schedule change. The Atlanta departure had originally been set for the following morning. Plenty of margin, daylight, clear air. Late yesterday, Mercer's office had moved it to tonight. The reason filtered down through the dispatcher. A competing bidder was flying into Atlanta, and Mercer wanted to be on the ground first, no matter what. No matter what. Those were the words that stuck. Because the evening forecast for the route had changed, too. A line of freezing rain and low-level icing was sliding up the coast. Exactly the kind of weather where a faulty engine anti-ice system stops being a paperwork problem and starts being a funeral. What Naomi didn't know yet was that the two strange things, the signed-off engine and the rushed departure, were the same thing wearing two faces. She found out at 6:15 that evening. She was in the maintenance office, the unairworthy logbook open in front of her, when she heard voices in the hallway. Mercer's, and one she didn't recognize, the contract mechanic. She stayed still. It's signed, the mechanic was saying, low and tight. But I'm telling you, I didn't fix anything. I couldn't even get the part in time. You told me to sign it off, and I signed it off. That's on paper now. That's my license. And Mercer, smooth as the marble under their feet. Relax. You'll have the part installed next week. Nobody flies it again until then. And tonight it's a 3-hour hop in a jet that cost more than your house. The system's barely used. We sign it, we go, we close, and there's a very generous consulting bonus in it for you. We are not delaying a $900 million deal over a maintenance light that flickers. A pause. Does Reyes know it's flagged? The mechanic again. And Mercer, Reyes doesn't read logbooks. Neither does the pilot. Trust me. Naomi's blood ran cold, then hot. The pieces locked into place with an almost physical click. The closed-door meeting. Hector's sudden leave. Pushed out, she understood now, because he'd refused to sign. The phantom contract crew. The rushed night departure into a forecast full of ice, with the one system that protects against that ice fraudulently certified as working. This wasn't an oversight. This was a man willing to gamble his CEO's life, his own colleagues' lives, and the lives of 2 pilots against a deadline and a bonus. And he'd built the whole bet on the assumption that the black woman in the captain's seat was too invisible, too unimportant to read. She thought about her grandmother's hands, cracked from bleach, turning the key in their front door at 4 a.m. She thought about every cockpit she'd ever earned her way into, and every man who'd looked, surprised to find her there. She thought about the soldiers she'd flown home. And she made the only decision a captain can make. The pilot in command has absolute authority over the aircraft. That isn't pride, it's law. Naomi closed the logbook, walked to the dispatch desk, and entered the words that would set the next 20 minutes on fire. Aircraft grounded by PIC. Anti-ice discrepancy. Will not fly. Then she pulled out her phone and photographed every page of that logbook. The original squawk, the false sign-off, the date that proved the work was never done. Proof first, she would need it. And she suspected, standing in the hum of the empty hangar, that she was going to need it very soon. At 6:40, Brandon Mercer arrived to fly. He swept into the private terminal trailing 2 junior executives and a cloud of cologne, phone pressed to his ear, already living in tomorrow's victory. He found his CEO's jet exactly where it should be, and saw, with irritation, that no one was loading. The cabin lights were off, and standing at the foot of the air stairs in a crisp uniform with 4 gold bars on each shoulder was a young black woman with her arms folded, blocking the way to the door. "We're not going anywhere tonight," Naomi said. "I've grounded this aircraft." Mercer barely looked at her. "Where's the captain? Go get whoever's in charge. We push in 20 minutes. He turned to one of his juniors. "Did catering load? Tell them to hurry it up." "I'm the captain," Naomi said. "Captain Naomi Carter, pilot in command. And this jet has a maintenance discrepancy on a critical system that has not been repaired. We are not flying into freezing rain on a falsified logbook." For a moment Mercer simply stared, as if she'd spoken a language he didn't recognize. Then he laughed, a short, ugly bark that bounced off the glass walls of the terminal. "You're the captain." He looked her up and down, slow and contemptuous, taking in everything but the stripes. "Sweetheart, pilots don't look like you. Captains look like." He gestured vaguely at the air, at some imagined man. "Captains, now where is the actual flight crew, before I have you removed for blocking my aircraft?" Tom Albright stepped out of the cabin doorway above them, and Mercer's face lit with relief. There's a real pilot." "Captain, your colleague here is confused about who she is. Let's get this bird moving." Tom didn't move. "She's not confused," he said quietly. "She's my captain, and if she's grounded the airplane, then the airplane is grounded. I'm not flying it either." The relief drained out of Mercer's face, and what replaced it was uglier than contempt. It was the look of a man whose certainty has just been touched, and who has decided to crush the thing that touched it. He turned the full weight of his attention on Naomi for the first time. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any idea what's riding on tonight? I have a $900 million deal closing in Atlanta in 14 hours, and you, a charter girl who got lucky, are not going to blow it, because you can't read a maintenance form. The log is signed. The aircraft is legal. Get in the seat and fly, or I will personally make sure you never sit in a cockpit again. Are we clear? The log is signed. Naomi agreed evenly. By a mechanic who never did the work. Because you told him not to. The terminal went silent. Mercer's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. That is a slanderous, insane accusation, and you are finished. Albright, if you've got any sense, you'll fly this aircraft. I'll find a new captain in an hour. There's always another pilot who needs the work. He pulled out his phone and started dialing, loud, performing for his juniors. I'm calling the charter desk right now. We are replacing this woman. Pack your bags, sweetheart. The grown-ups are taking the plane. You can call whoever you want, Naomi said, and her voice didn't shake. No one can override a PIC grounding except the FA. Not the charter desk. Not you. And the second another crew touches that airplane with this discrepancy open, they inherit the falsified log and the federal charges that come with it. Falsifying an aircraft maintenance record is a felony. People go to prison for it. So go ahead. Call. She held up her phone. I've already documented everything. For one heartbeat, Brandon Mercer's mask cracked. The juniors saw it. Tom saw it. The fear behind the bluster, the realization that the invisible woman had not only seen him but caught him. Then the mask slammed back down, and he did the thing that small men do when they're cornered. He reached for the ugliest weapon he had. You people, he started, his voice rising, always think you're owed something. You get handed a uniform and a diversity slot and you think that makes you. He never finished the sentence. Brandon. The single word came from behind him, cutting through the terminal like a wire. Mercer spun around. Catherine Reyes stood 10 feet away in a charcoal coat, having walked in unannounced through the side entrance the way she always did, a leather flight bag of her own paperwork over one shoulder. Her face was carved from stone. Beside her stood a man in a dark suit Mercer didn't recognize, and a second man, older, who Naomi recognized instantly. Hector Ruiz. Catherine, Mercer recovered fast, the smile snapping back into place. Perfect timing. We've got a problem with the crew. This captain has decided to ground the jet over a paperwork glitch, and frankly her attitude has been. I heard her attitude, Catherine said. I heard yours too. I've been standing in that hallway for 4 minutes. She let that land. Hector called me this afternoon from his sister's house, where he's been hiding since you pressured him to sign off an engine he told you was unsafe. He couldn't live with it. So he called the one person at this company who'd listen. Her eyes moved to the logbook in Naomi's hand. Captain Carter, walk me through what you found. Naomi did. Calm, precise, the way she'd brief a flight. The original squawk on the engine cowl anti-ice, Tom's signature, 4 days old. The intermittent fault, the kind that fails for good in exactly the cold, wet conditions waiting up the coast tonight. The sudden sign-off by a contractor who'd never done the work. The schedule moved to beat a competitor. The overheard conversation, word for word. And the photographs, every page, time-stamped, undeniable, as she spoke. The 2 junior executives drifted backward, away from Mercer, the way people step back from a man standing in a puddle near a downed wire. Catherine turned to the man in the dark suit. This is our outside counsel, she told the room. I called him from the car. Then, to Mercer, you ordered a federal maintenance record falsified. You scheduled my aircraft, with me on it, with these 2 on it, with 2 pilots on it, to fly into known icing conditions on an engine that protects against icing, which you knew did not work. You did it to save a deadline. And when the captain who caught you wouldn't gamble 9 lives on your bonus, you called her a diversity slot. Her voice never rose. It didn't have to. Brandon, you didn't just commit a felony. You tried to kill us. And you decided the woman who saved your life wasn't smart enough to notice. Mercer's hands were trembling now, the manicured fingers, the Patek catching the light, all of it shaking. Catherine. She's twisting. The log was signed. Legally signed. I never told anyone to. I'm on the recording, Hector said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken. I recorded it. After you threatened my license. You said, Reyes doesn't read logbooks. Neither does the pilot. He looked at Naomi, and something passed between them. Two people who'd been counted invisible by the same man. She read it, first page to last. Like always. The dark-suited lawyer stepped forward. Mr. Mercer, you're suspended effective immediately pending termination for cause. We'll be filing a report with the FAA and the U.S. Attorney's Office tonight. Falsification of aircraft maintenance records is a federal felony, and given the endangerment, I'd advise you to retain criminal counsel before you say anything else. He nodded toward the door, where two airport security officers had quietly appeared. These gentlemen will escort you off the property. It happened fast, the way these things do once they tip. Mercer's deal, the $900 million merger he'd been 3 days from closing, collapsed within the week when the board learned how he'd tried to make the flight. His board seat evaporated. The corner office he'd been certain was his went to someone else. And on a rain-slick evening, in front of two junior colleagues who would tell the story for the rest of their careers, Brandon Mercer was walked out of a private terminal by airport security while a young black woman he'd called Sweetheart stood at the foot of the air stairs and watched him go. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. Catherine Reyes watched the glass doors close behind him. Then she turned to Naomi, and the stone in her face softened into something else. I owe you more than a thank you, she said. 3 years ago, you talked me through the worst flight of my life, and I hired you on a hunch. Tonight, you told the most powerful man in my company no, with your job on the line, because 9 people's lives were worth more than his deal. That's not luck. That's the best pilot I've ever flown with, doing exactly what I pay her to do. She paused. He said pilots don't look like you. He was right about one thing, Captain. The ones who'd have killed us all tonight to make a meeting, they look exactly like him. Naomi let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since she was 17. I just read the logbook, she said. You did a lot more than that. Catherine glanced at the dark, silent jet, then at the line of freezing rain now ticking against the terminal glass. The backup aircraft is fueled, and the discrepancy's irrelevant. Different airframe. The competitor can land first. I don't care anymore. But I'm not flying tonight with anyone but you. So whenever you're ready, Captain Carter, and only when you say it's safe, you're flying my jet to Atlanta. And so she did. Hours later, after the front had passed and the sky had cleared to a hard black scatter of stars, Captain Naomi Carter pushed 2 throttles forward on a sound, fully airworthy aircraft and lifted the CEO of Vantage Global off the runway into a calm night. Smooth as glass all the way down the coast. The woman they said couldn't be a pilot was the one flying their CEO's private jet that night. She'd always been the one. They just hadn't looked. By the end of the week, Brandon Mercer was facing a federal indictment and the permanent revocation of any role in aviation he might ever have dreamed of. The contract mechanic who'd signed the false entry surrendered his license and turned state's witness. The FAA opened a full review of Vantage's flight department and found that every single grounding decision Captain Carter had ever made was correct, by the book, and in 2 prior cases had quietly prevented exactly the kind of incident that ends up on the news. Hector Ruiz came back to the hangar the following Monday, reinstated with back pay and a public apology, his 19 years finally seen. 6 months later, Naomi Carter walked into the same executive hangar at 5:30 in the morning, 40 minutes early, coffee in the same dented thermos. But the title on her flight bag had changed. Director of Flight Operations. She ran the entire department now. Every aircraft, every crew, every maintenance contract that passed through Vantage Global. The first policy she wrote made it impossible for any executive, at any level, to ever again pressure a mechanic or override a captain's safety call. The second created the Ruiz Standard, named for the man whose phone call saved 9 lives, requiring 2 independent signatures on every critical sign-off. And the third was the one closest to her heart, a fully funded scholarship and apprenticeship program for kids from neighborhoods like the ones she grew up in. The ones pushing brooms across ramps and looking up at jets they've been told aren't for them. 11 of them soloed that first year. 9 were young women. 6 were black. Catherine Reyes told the whole story at the company's annual meeting. The grounded jet, the falsified log, the 4 minutes she'd stood in a hallway listening to a man reveal exactly who he was. 1,400 employees gave Naomi a standing ovation. She didn't cry until she got back to the hangar. There's a photograph on the wall of the flight operations office now. It's grainy, blown up from an old phone, and it shows a skinny 17-year-old in a borrowed coverall standing on a wet ramp outside Detroit, broom in one hand, head tilted back to watch a jet climb into the gray. Underneath it, in Naomi's own handwriting, there's a single line. The sky was always free to look at. Nobody told me I couldn't keep looking. Every morning at 5:30, the new apprentices walk past it on their way in. And every morning, the granddaughter of a woman who cleaned office buildings at night unlocks the door, turns on the lights, and reads the logbook, first page to last. Like always,